The energy of morning intimacy is not simply physical, it's vibrational. It's that sacred space between waking and doing. When the body is rested, the mind hasn't yet been invaded by the noise of the day, and the spirit is closest to stillness. In that moment, connection is not an act of habit, it's an act of energy. Men feel this in a way that is often misunderstood. When he reaches out in the morning, it's not always about lust. It's about aligning himself with something real before the world pulls him into the storm of responsibility. It's about starting his day from connection rather than competition, from affection rather than anxiety. That early light carries a frequency, quiet, unfiltered, honest. There is something deeply grounding about feeling desired before emails, meetings, and demands consume his focus. It's not only pleasure that calls him, it's peace. In the morning, the masculine energy is at its highest, not just hormonally, but energetically. It seeks direction, purpose, movement. And when intimacy meets that energy, it transforms raw drive into harmony. It's like tuning an instrument before a performance. Morning connection sets the tone for how he carries himself, how he communicates, how he approaches his day. A man who begins his morning in closeness, not chaos, carries a different vibration. He moves through his world with calm confidence instead of quiet frustration. This is why men subconsciously crave those early moments, not for release, but for renewal. It's a reset button for the heart. There's also a certain innocence to morning intimacy because it exists before the masks go on. Before anyone has adjusted their posture, fixed their hair, or armored themselves in roles, the rawness of that hour strips away pretenses. It's just two beings, unfiltered, breathing the same air, connecting in truth. That's what makes it powerful. The simplicity of it. Men may not articulate it, but they feel it. They sense that morning connection has no performance, no agenda, no pressure to impress. It's connection in its purest form, where attraction meets authenticity. Morning intimacy is also deeply symbolic. It represents a new beginning, a soft declaration that even after sleep, after silence, the connection remains alive. It reminds him that love is not a routine, it's an energy that can be renewed daily. The touch, the closeness, the warmth of shared breath, it all speaks to something primal within him, the part that thrives not on validation, but on connection. When that energy flows between two people, it creates more than passion, it creates alignment. He steps out into the day more patient, more focused, more anchored in gratitude because his morning began not with the world's demands, but with intimacy's quiet power. That is the secret most never notice, that morning connection is not the beginning of desire, it's the continuation of emotional energy from the night before. It's the bridge between rest and reality, between being and becoming, between two people who choose connection before conversation, energy before activity, and presence before performance. When a man wakes up and feels desired, something deep inside him awakens beyond the physical. It's not about ego or conquest. It's about validation at the level of identity. The masculine energy is built to protect, to provide, to move forward. But beneath that drive lives a quieter yearning, the need to feel wanted, chosen, and valued not just for what he does, but for who he is. When that recognition comes from his partner in those early morning hours, it ignites something powerful inside him. It's as if the world whispers, "You matter, you're seen." That feeling becomes the invisible armor he wears throughout the day. His confidence doesn't just rise from compliments or success. It rises from that moment of emotional confirmation, the knowing that he's not invisible in the eyes of the one he cares for. Most men will never say this aloud because they've been conditioned to believe confidence should be self-generated. That needing reassurance makes them weak. But the truth is even the strongest men draw strength from emotional connection. Morning intimacy becomes a mirror that reflects his worth back to him. When a woman leans into him, touches him, or simply looks at him with desire before the day begins, it tells him something far beyond words. It says, "You're still wanted, even in your most unguarded form." And that acknowledgement does more than flatter. It grounds him. It steadies him in a world that often demands endless performance. When he feels desired in the morning, his mind shifts. The small irritations that usually weigh on him lose their power. The stress that might have followed him to work, the self-doubt that sometimes shadows his ambition, they soften. He moves through his day with a quiet certainty, because connection has already reminded him of his worth. That confidence radiates in how he walks, how he speaks, how he meets challenges. It's the subtle difference between reacting and responding, between pushing through and flowing with purpose. Morning connection acts as fuel, emotional fuel that keeps his inner engine running at a frequency of assurance and calm strength. There's also something sacred about feeling chosen without performance. In the morning, there's no stage, no effort, no pretense. It's just the raw essence of two people, still half dreaming, still wrapped in warmth, choosing each other again. For a man, that choice is deeply symbolic. It's not about seduction, it's about significance. It tells him that he doesn't need to prove, to impress, to earn. He simply needs to be. That realization shifts his energy entirely. He begins to see his partner not only as someone who desires him, but as someone who reaffirms his humanity, his masculinity, his emotional depth. Every man carries silent insecurities, the quiet fear of being replaceable or unseen. Morning intimacy dissolves that fear in a way no words could. It reconnects him with his strength. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that protects and nurtures. That confidence doesn't shout, it hums. It becomes the foundation for how he shows up in every aspect of his day, in his work, his interactions, his presence. When he feels desired before the world demands anything from him, it reminds him that his worth is not earned through success, but acknowledged through love, and that realization fuels his purpose like nothing else can. Morning moments hold a unique kind of magic because they are unpolished and honest. There's something deeply human about the softness of dawn. When everything still feels half dreamed and half awake, in that haze, perfection loses its grip and presence takes over. For men, that rawness carries a quiet invitation to let go of control, to stop performing, to simply exist in the simplicity of connection. Morning intimacy is not about strategy, it's about surrender, the messy hair, the warmth of the sheets, the unfiltered scent of skin. These things create a setting where authenticity replaces performance. It's not about seduction in the cinematic sense, but about comfort, trust, and unguarded playfulness that says, we can meet here as we are. Men often live in a world that rewards control, composure, and precision. They're trained to plan, to calculate, to achieve. But in the quiet chaos of morning, that structure dissolves. There's no script, no plan, only spontaneity. That spontaneity is what makes morning intimacy so freeing. It reminds him that not everything of value must be managed or earned. It allows him to experience connection not through thinking, but through feeling. Playfulness becomes the language of intimacy. A teasing smile, a sleepy laugh, a soft touch that asks nothing but presence. These are the gestures that remind him of the joy hidden beneath the surface of routine. There's also something profoundly healing in the playfulness of these moments. It brings out the childlike essence that so many men suppress in the pursuit of responsibility. When a woman meets him in that space with laughter and curiosity instead of judgment or pressure, it creates safety. It tells him that he doesn't have to perform strength, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that desire can coexist with tenderness. Morning intimacy invites both people to explore rather than execute. It's not about doing something right, it's about being together fully. And in that shared playfulness, connection deepens without words. This surrender isn't one-sided. It's a mutual melting of roles. She lets go of her need to appear composed. He lets go of his need to appear in control. And what remains is something rare, emotional nakedness. That's what men secretly crave in those moments, though they may never say it. They long for spaces where they can be playful without being misunderstood, where they can be gentle without being diminished. where the laughter that escapes between sleepy kisses feels as real as the desire that follows. This kind of connection doesn't require planning or preparation, it requires presence. And presence is the most powerful form of intimacy. It's when two people step out of thought and into sensation, when they allow their bodies and emotions to communicate freely. In the morning, when the world hasn't yet rushed in, presence feels effortless. Time slows. The smallest gestures carry meaning. A sigh, a brush of skin, the rhythm of breathing together. It's not grand or elaborate, it's pure and grounding. That playfulness becomes the bridge between passion and peace. For men, it's a reminder that love doesn't have to be performed, that attraction doesn't have to be perfect, and that connection, when met with laughter and softness, becomes the most natural thing in the world. Touch in the morning carries a language that no words can fully translate. It speaks through sensation, through rhythm, through the simple awareness of being close. When a man wakes and feels that soft brush of skin against his own, something in him responds instinctively, not in thought but in feeling. It bypasses logic and lands directly in the heart. The human body has memory, and touch is one of its oldest forms of communication. Before we ever learn to speak, we learn to connect through proximity, warmth, and contact. Morning intimacy awakens that ancient code. For men, that moment of touch before words have been exchanged is like a signal that everything is safe, everything is right, everything is in harmony. It's reassurance without explanation. When he feels that quiet connection, it reaches places that conversations cannot. Words can be filtered, misinterpreted, or misunderstood. But the way a hand rests on his chest, the way breath moves against his neck, those gestures tell him something simple yet profound, that he belongs. In the stillness of morning, when minds are not yet racing, touch becomes truth. It communicates acceptance, affection, and grounding. It's as if the body says, "You are here and you are enough." That's the language that resonates most deeply for men who are often taught to withhold emotion, to bury softness under strength. In those unguarded minutes, touch allows him to access what his words might never express. His vulnerability, his tenderness, his need to feel emotionally connected through physical presence. It's not about passion alone, it's about emotion translated through contact. When a woman reaches out with care, when her fingertips linger without urgency, she's sending an unspoken message of understanding. She's telling him that intimacy is not a demand, but a dialogue, not about performance but connection. That small gesture of reaching across the sheets can dissolve tension, rebuild trust, and anchor two people in a frequency of calm affection. For men, that emotional assurance is powerful. It allows them to exhale, to let their guard down, to stop striving for a moment and simply receive. Touch has the power to slow the rhythm of thought and synchronize two bodies into the same emotional space. The beauty of morning is that touch doesn't need to be elaborate to be meaningful. It could be a slow trace of fingers, a shared breath, or the quiet intertwining of hands. These moments remind him that intimacy isn't only about desire. It's about acknowledgement. The world may see him as someone who must always lead, always act, always provide. But that small act of touch tells him that here, he doesn't need to do anything at all. He can simply be. That is the emotional sanctuary men rarely talk about but constantly seek. In that stillness, touch becomes a form of emotional grounding. It aligns his inner state before the world pulls him outward. It reminds him of connection before communication, of belonging before business. It's not always the intensity of passion that leaves a mark. It's the softness, the tenderness, the quiet assurance that he is cared for, desired, and understood without explanation. That's the kind of touch that lingers long after the morning ends, shaping his mood, his confidence, and his emotional balance throughout the day. For most men, morning intimacy is far more than a physical impulse. It is the body's natural rhythm aligning with emotion, instinct, and connection. The early hours carry a different kind of silence, a silence that invites alignment between what the body wants and what the heart feels. Biologically, a man's energy is at its peak in the morning, but emotionally, that is also when he is most open to genuine connection if he feels safe and understood. This combination creates a moment of extraordinary balance, a harmony between biology and intimacy. When that rhythm is honored rather than resisted, it turns physical desire into a form of communication, one that bridges the gap between emotion and instinct. Men rarely express this consciously, yet it's what they feel deeply. They want to be met not only in passion, but in energy, in rhythm, in presence. There is something deeply human about aligning with the natural timing of the body. Morning light, the warmth of the sheets, the unhurried pace, these conditions quiet the mind and amplify sensation. When a woman understands that this time is not just about physical readiness, but emotional openness, she steps into his world in a way that transcends words. The masculine energy that often feels pressured to perform or control finally finds permission to relax into connection. In this moment, intimacy becomes less about action and more about attunement, two energies meeting where body and emotion intersect. It's the place where instinct feels safe enough to slow down, where passion softens into closeness. Men are rarely taught to view desire as emotional. They grow up associating it with need, with drive, with something that must be controlled or expressed, but seldom with tenderness. Yet in the morning, when the mind hasn't fully armored itself for the day, emotion slips through the cracks. The desire he feels isn't always about pleasure. It's often about reassurance that he can feel connect and be accepted in his natural state. When that desire is met with warmth rather than hesitation, with affection rather than judgment, it deepens trust. It transforms what could have been a fleeting physical impulse into an exchange of emotional energy. That's why morning intimacy carries so much depth. It's where vulnerability meets vitality. In these moments, the synchronization between two people becomes effortless. Breathing begins to align, heartbeats find a rhythm, and both energies fall into the same quiet pulse. It's not something that can be forced or planned, it simply unfolds. This synchronicity is what gives the encounter its grounding power. It sets the emotional tone for the day, not through words but through chemistry. The body remembers that alignment, and it colors the rest of his interactions, his patience, his focus, his ability to connect. It's as if that harmony whispers through him long after the moment passes. When connection happens in this natural rhythm, it nourishes both partners beyond the physical. It becomes a kind of meditation, a shared awareness of life's simplest, most profound truth, that being fully present with another person can quiet every internal noise. For a man, this is not just pleasure, it's restoration. It's a reminder that his drive is not separate from his depth, that his body and heart are not in conflict, but in conversation. Morning intimacy, when understood this way, becomes an act of emotional alignment, a silent merging of desire and devotion, instinct and tenderness, movement and stillness. Morning connection carries within it the quiet seed of momentum, a rhythm that doesn't just awaken the body, but sets a tone for how two people move through the rest of the day. When intimacy happens in those early hours, it does something profound to the energy between partners. It builds a kind of emotional inertia. It begins with stillness and warmth, but what follows is motion, flow, a pulse that moves from the private to the public, from the intimate to the energetic. For a man, this connection isn't simply an indulgence, it's a reset. It aligns his emotions, his confidence, and his focus in ways he may not consciously recognize, but instinctively feels. He steps into the day with more patience, more presence, and a subtle strength that comes not from effort but from emotional grounding. What begins as closeness evolves into clarity. Morning intimacy releases oxytocin, lowers stress, and boosts dopamine. But beyond the biology lies something spiritual, a sense of alignment that whispers, "I'm connected, I'm seen, I'm alive." That emotional charge doesn't fade once he leaves the room, it travels with him. It affects how he speaks, how he listens, how he carries himself through challenges. When two people share that kind of connection, they build an emotional ecosystem that feeds both of them long after the moment has passed. The man feels fueled, the woman feels cherished, and the relationship itself feels more anchored. It's not about starting the day with passion for the sake of excitement, but about creating continuity between intimacy and daily life, between softness and strength. Morning connection also builds momentum in trust. It communicates a message far more powerful than words could ever deliver. I choose you today. That sense of being chosen every morning in you reshapes the foundation of a relationship. It breaks the monotony of routine and turns each day into a renewal rather than repetition. For men, that feeling of consistency, of knowing that closeness isn't conditional on timing or circumstance, creates stability. It becomes a quiet assurance that no matter what the day demands, there's a shared energy that unites them. That assurance is what makes him more grounded, less reactive, and more emotionally available throughout the day. There's also something deeply psychological about this momentum. Human beings are energetic creatures, constantly absorbing and projecting. When intimacy fills the morning air, it infuses the rest of the day with lightness. It's as if the emotional frequency of connection lingers in everything that follows. In a text sent later, in a glance exchanged over dinner, in the ease of conversation that night. It turns the ordinary into something charged with intention. The body remembers connection the way it remembers music. It carries the rhythm silently. Morning intimacy, therefore, is not a moment, it's a frequency that carries forward. This is why men often describe feeling more focused, more creative, more capable after sharing that space. It's not just hormonal, it's energetic. It's the feeling of having been emotionally filled rather than emptied. The day begins with closeness, and that closeness becomes momentum. Momentum for affection, for gratitude, for being fully present. It's not about intensity, but about alignment. A reminder that when the day starts with love, everything that follows unfolds with more purpose and grace.